Okay, imagine this. You're at the Dubai Air Show. Blue sky, desert backdrop.
Right.
And there's this buzz,
Yeah.
a real mix of people, aviation geeks, military types, everyone looking up.
Anticipation.
Totally. And then whoosh, this Russian Su-35 tears across the sky.
Yeah.
And what it did, honestly, it was something else.
Maneuverability is legendary.
It really is. Pulling off these like impossible loops, crazy spins, and that bell thing where it just hangs there.
Sinks time almost.
Yeah. You could almost hear the crowd just gasp. It was wild.
It's an incredible display, isn't it? A mix of amazing engineering and, well, serious pilot skill.
Exactly. And the pilot, Sergei Bogdan, this guy isn't just anyone. Hero of Russia, honored test pilot, heads up flight services at Sukhoi. And get this, he's tested over 50 different combat aircraft. 50.
That's a huge amount of experience.
Right. So for this deep dive, we've got some great material, including an interview with Bogdan himself. We want to figure out what makes him and that Su-35 just so remarkable. So what's the secret sauce there?
Yeah, our goal is to look at both the machine, the tech, and the man flying it. So let's start with the Su-35 itself. Bogdan calls it a Generation 4++ fighter.
4++. Okay, what does that actually mean in practical terms?
Well, think of fourth-gen fighters like the older Su-27 as, the established modern baseline. The Su-35, this 4+++, it's basically knocking on the door of the fifth generation. It's got a lot of advanced stuff packed in.
He used that analogy, didn't he? The Su-27 is like a truck, the Su-35 is like a performance car.
Exactly. That really paints a picture of the leap in, well, refinement and capability.
So what makes it the passenger car then? What are the big upgrades?
Okay, it's pretty comprehensive. First off, the radar. Bogdan highlights its range. We're talking detection hundreds of kilometers out.
Wow.
Yeah, land, sea, air targets. It sees everything far away, and it can track loads of them at once.
Okay, so better eyes. What about teeth?
Definitely more bite. A much wider range of weapons. It can carry guided missiles, unguided stuff, the works.
So it sees further and has more options to respond. Makes sense.
Precisely. And it's designed to survive. It's got sophisticated defense systems, things like jamming.
Electronic noise to confuse enemy radar.
You got it. And active countermeasures, think flares, decoys to throw off incoming missiles. Plus, the engine, thrust vectoring.
Ah, that's the key to the crazy moves, right?
Yeah.
Redirecting the engine exhaust.
That's it. It gives the pilot unbelievable control. That's how you get those wild aerobatics. But crucially, it also boosts safety, helps prevent stalls at low speed.
So flying tail first, or doing the bell freeze that comes from the thrust vectoring, but it's not just for air shows, presumably. Big advantage in a dogfight.
Oh, absolutely critical. In close combat, that kind of fingertip control is a game changer. Bogdan even said pilots can almost fly by feel in those moments, not glued to the instruments.
Wow.
And get this, he mentioned a pseudo return to horizontal flight mode. If things get hairy, maybe the pilot gets disoriented.
Yeah.
If they just let go of the controls, the plane can basically right itself, automatically stabilizes.
Like a safety net built into the flight controls. That's pretty smart.
Very smart.
It's speaking of smarts, what about the AI he mentioned? Sounds like the plane is doing some thinking itself.
It kind of acts like a super fast co-pilot. Yeah. The system can track, I think he said, over 30 targets.
30.
And then it figures out which ones are the most dangerous based on distance, speed, how quickly they're closing in.
And it helps the pilot engage them.
It can engage multiple high-priority targets at the same time. And if a target tries to dodge, the AI recalculates, reprioritizes, keeps the pressure on. It just processes info way faster than a human could.
So it takes a huge load off the pilot in a complex fight.
Exactly. Lets them focus on the bigger picture, the strategy.
Okay, so let's piece this together. Long-range fight, powerful radar, plus it carries, what, 12 air-to-air missiles?
Up to 12, yeah. So a big advantage right off the bat.
And then if it gets close in?
That high energy from the engines and aerodynamics, plus the agility from thrust vectoring, especially at lower speeds. It's a potent combination. Bogdan used that analogy of a soldier being good with a rifle, pistol, bayonet, hand-to-hand effective at all ranges.
He sounded pretty confident about how it stacks up against competitors, too. Said, while anything can compete, the Su-35 has a real edge, especially one-on-one or in small groups.
Yeah, he pointed to the radar and the electronic warfare suite as key advantages there.
But he also stressed that test pilots like him are always critical, right? Always looking for what can be improved.
Absolutely. That's their job. Find the flaws, push the limits, make it better, even with something this advanced.
Which brings us to the big question. How does it compare to rivals? Specifically, the American F-22 Raptor. Bogdan had thoughts on that.
He did, and pretty direct ones. He basically said he wouldn't favor the F-22.
Really? Why?
He pointed back about a decade, saying the older Su-30 was already doing more complex aerobatics then. His point was that Russian aviation tech hadn't stood still since.
That's quite a claim. Does that track with other info? Like those exercises where Su-27 family jets flown by, say, India or Malaysia go up against NATO planes?
Well, Bogdan referenced those exercises, yeah. The stats, as he presented them, suggest the Sukhoi planes generally perform strongly, often coming out on top in simulated combat, even if they take some losses in the scenarios. Suggests they are very capable platforms.
Okay, so the Su-35 is clearly a beast of a machine. But let's shift focus to the man, Sergei Bogdan. His story is just as fascinating. Born 62, flight school 83, test pilot by 93. The basics.
Right. But the career, it's incredibly deep, testing 57 types and modifications of aircraft. Just think about the skill involved in adapting to so many different machines.
That's mind-boggling.
And he did the first carrier landings for the Su-33 on the Admiral Kuznetsov. He tested the Su-47 Burkett.
The one with the forward-swept wings, that's really experimental design.
That's the one. Shows he's comfortable right at the cutting edge. And, maybe most significantly, he was the first pilot to fly the Su-57, Russia's fifth-gen fighter, back in 2010.
A huge milestone.
Yeah.
First flight on a brand new generation.
Absolutely. And the numbers, over 6,000 flights, 5,800 hours logged, 700 hours just on the Su-35 alone.
Wow.
And he's not just testing, he's the face of these aircraft. It shows worldwide: Algeria, Libya, Venezuela, China, France. He even flew a fighter non-stop across the Atlantic to South America.
Without refueling. In a fighter.
Yep, an incredible feat.
No wonder he was made a hero of Russia in 2011. His contribution sounds immense.
Undeniably. But it's the little details that make him seem, well, human, like admitting he has a fear of heights.
A test pilot flying those machines fears heights. How does that work?
He explained it as just normal self-preservation, an instinct you have to consciously manage and overcome. It kind of makes his achievements even more impressive, doesn't it?
It really does. And that story about him talking to the T-50, the Su-57 prototype, before its first flight.
Yeah, it shows this deep connection, this sort of relationship pilots can have with their aircraft, almost like they're alive.
And it ties into that superstitious side he mentioned, which is apparently common.
Seems so. Things like testing new gear on routine flights first, not on something critical. Or the ritual of walking around, touching the plane before getting in. It's about respect for the machine and the risks, I think.
He also touched on the Su-57, the next step up from the Su-35.
Yeah.
What were the key differences he pointed out?
Well, the big ones are low radar visibility stealth, essentially.
Okay.
Plus, even better radar, more powerful weapons, and new engines. It's the next evolution.
And it's not just test pilots flying it now.
Apparently not. Regular military pilots, even non-test pilots, have flown it. Suggests it's moving towards operational status. But Bogdan's final comment really struck me. He said he doesn't know any other profession besides flying.
Total dedication.
Absolutely. His whole life is aviation.
And thinking back to those air shows, like his Su-57 display at MAKS 2019, reports called it sensational, a huge marketing moment.
Definitely. And apparently he's known for flying precisely, keeping the jet right in view for the photographers. A pro through and through.
A showman as well as a pilot.
You could say that. The comparison to someone like Chuck Yeager in the U.S. seems fair, though maybe Bogdan's a bit more publicly visible in this era.
So wrapping this up, this deep dive really highlights the Su-35 as this incredible piece of 4++ generation tech, bridging that gap to the 5th gen. You've got the radar, the weapons, the AI, that amazing agility from thrust vectoring.
It's a powerhouse. And Sergei Bogdan is absolutely central to it, not just demonstrating it, but deeply involved in its development, drawing on decades of testing literally dozens of aircraft types. Hero of Russia, first to fly the Su-57, his credentials are just extraordinary.
His skill and experience are undeniable. He's clearly shaped modern Russian military aviation in a major way.
A true giant in the field.
Which leaves you wondering, doesn't it? We see these leaps with the Su-35, the Su-57. What's next? What kind of breakthroughs in aviation tech are bubbling under the surface now? Things that might totally change the game again. Not just for military jets, but maybe even for how we fly commercially in the decades ahead. What's over that horizon?